Welcome to the SADF Podcast, where we explore pressing global issues through the lens of justice, democracy, and human rights. In today's episode, Justice Without Borders, Argentina's landmark ruling on Rohingya genocide, we delve into a groundbreaking legal decision that has reverberated far beyond Latin America. In a historic move, an Argentine federal court has invoked universal jurisdiction to issue arrest warrants for 25 Myanmar officials, including military leaders and former state councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, for their alleged roles in the genocide and systemic violence against the Rohingya community. This case marks a pivotal moment in international law, raising profound questions about accountability, sovereignty, and the global fight against impunity. Joining us to unpack this landmark ruling is Dr. Irene Victoria Massimino, a distinguished human rights lawyer, academic, and international legal expert, and a personal friend of mine. Irene has served as a co founder of the Argentinian Institute for Genocide Studies and has worked extensively on issues of genocide, transitional justice, and international criminal law. Her insights have shaped legal discourse across continents, and today she helps us understand the significance of Argentina's bold legal stance. Together, we will explore the legal foundations of universal jurisdiction, the role of civil society in driving international justice, and how this ruling intersects with the plight of Rohingya refugees, especially in neighboring Bangladesh, which has borne the humanitarian burden of this crisis. So stay with us as we navigate the intersection of law, morality, and global solidarity in the pursuit of justice for one of the world's most persecuted communities. Hello, Irene. How are you?
Thank you, Tapush. I'm very well. Thank you for this generous invitation and your generous introduction. It's a pleasure to see you after such a long time. As you said, we've been friends for 10 years now.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful to share this moment, and congratulations on this podcast, on this series of podcasts with such relevant topics as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, first of all, we would like to know about the background and the legal context of the case that we said. So, can you start by explaining what universal jurisdiction is and how Argentina applies it?
Absolutely, Tapush. I think is wonderful. I was recently in a conference in Armenia, and one of the persons who was giving a presentation mentioned that actually universal jurisdiction is the future. And there were questions about the ICC and the difficulties of trying, in particular, the crime of aggression. So everybody was agreed that universal jurisdiction is the future. So I really appreciate this timely topic in the podcast. Universal jurisdiction is a legal, a judicial jurisdiction that is triggered in some countries. Not every country authorizes, and it's triggered without any link with the territory where the crime occurred or the passive or active personality of perpetrator and victim, right? So there's no whatsoever connection. However, a foundation is based on the gravity of the crime, of the seriousness of the crime, and therefore some countries have accepted to open their courts in order to try crimes that are considered to be appalling for the entire humanity, and that entire humanity should know what has happened in those particular scenarios. Argentina is one of the cases. It has become a little bit of a hub of universal jurisdiction lately. It is included in our constitution. Article 118 includes universal jurisdiction as mandatory for federal courts. And the federal courts are triggered, of course, because of the nature of the crime. So it's mainly based on the nature of the crime, but there is no link whatsoever with the territory, the victims, or perpetrators. Some universal jurisdiction cases in other countries have considered that there must be a link, right? So that's considered like relative universal jurisdiction. But in the case of Argentina, there is no link with the persecution of Rohingyas in Myanmar, and there is no Argentinian victims, and of course, there is no Argentinian perpetrators. So there is no other interest but to find out what happened to the Rohingyas.
Now, the next question is that why did Argentina take up this case involving crimes in Myanmar? especially on Rohingyas?
This is an interesting question, Tapush, because there's no actual clear answer. Argentina in the last I could say maybe the last decade has become a place where non governmental organizations, in particular civil society representatives, have come to try to open cases where there is an impossibility, either because it's unwillingness in many cases, like, of course, Myanmar, or also in cases where it's difficult because of the circumstances to open up cases for international crimes. So Argentina became sort of as I said, sort of a hub that would receive many complaints, not of course a large extent, because these crimes are difficult to prove, they're difficult to gather information, the distance, the geographical distance, etc. But nevertheless, we have become a place, a jurisdiction that is very, very important. There are cases investigated from the crimes committed by Franco dictatorship in Spain, which have become very, very relevant. Ironically, because in the 90s, as you know, you probably recall from our exchanges on justice and accountability, in the 90s, when Argentina was unable to investigate its own crimes
Hmm.
committed during the dictatorship, Argentina went to Spain for universal jurisdiction.
Right.
But universal jurisdiction in Spain now is highly restricted due to internal laws that have limited absolutely its exercise. So Argentina is a new place. In Latin America that I'm aware of, there's only one other country, which is Ecuador, that includes in its criminal code the possibility of universal jurisdiction, but I don't know whether that has been ever triggered. Not that I'm aware. We have now investigations for Venezuela. Myanmar is, of course, it's probably the most important one because of the recent issue of arrest warrants that you just mentioned.
Hmm.
But it really makes me proud of my country in that sense. I think it's also the vast experience of Argentina trying its own human rights abuses during the dictatorship that has put in this sort of in this area, in this arena, has put Argentina in such a good position because we have our own experience for decades now of civil
Right.
society struggle and the courts adjusting to the criminality of the nature of international crimes. So I think that that combination of factors has made it a place that it's sort of as I said, a trending place to go for universal jurisdiction cases.
I mean, the idea I have is generally people in South Asia or in overall Asia do not have too much knowledge about Latin American jurisprudence, because due to the geographical distance, very few people actually explore that or go for studies or go for work over there. But yeah, I think in last 20 years it has increased, especially Indians are doing business over there. Probably that's why they have certain lawyers who have commercial interest towards Argentina and other Latin American countries. But most of the countries, they do not have this idea that Argentina has a universal jurisdiction. People, whenever we talk about universal jurisdiction, people think USA, UK, Russia, or even China, they are practicing these kind of things. But universal jurisdiction, as you said, is a kind of practice which is actually exercised by a state against a certain perpetrator who has committed international crimes, maybe in his jurisdiction or in any other country. So, going forward with this, so why do you think this ruling is historically significant?
Yes, absolutely. As you mentioned, I think going back a little bit to what you just said about Asia and not knowing about the jurisprudence of Latin America in general and of Argentina in particular, I think it's very interesting how this sort of faraway scenario of criminality ended up in the other corner of the world. But there are links. One of the NGOs is located, the Rohingya NGO is located in the UK, and Europe in general is quite aware of what is happening in Argentina in the field of human rights in general, but in particular in universal jurisdiction. A former rapporteur in Myanmar was also involved in the case, and therefore knowing quite well, because he's Argentinian, knowing quite well what is happening and the possibilities there. As a landmark case, first of all, is there has been It's the first case actually that has international arrest warrants that should have been already informed to Interpol, but it's also the extent of the arrest warrants and the level of the perpetrators as well. We are talking about 25 international arrest warrants of high rank officials of the Myanmar government. And that is unprecedented, really, for a case of this kind. And when I'm thinking of the different, that I know not that many, of course, of different cases around the world, I think this is not only a breakthrough case for Argentina, but it is also for the world in general. It sets an example that who knows whether the people will end up in Argentina, etc., but at least to reach to the point where there is sufficient evidence to believe that they might have committed either genocide or crimes against humanity and have 25 international arrest warrants. It's really unprecedented that I recall. So I think it makes it so important, despite the fact that there are other judicial cases or things going on. It makes it probably the most important case for the Rohingya at the moment, and the most important case in universal jurisdiction at the
Mhm.
moment.
Right. I mean,
Worldwide, I mean. Mhm.
the pattern that you and me both have experienced, that perpetrators commit the crime at one place and they leave that place after a significant amount of time, and then they go to some countries where they think that they can have safe haven. So when we are having countries like Argentina inflicting or using their universal jurisdiction on these type of cases, this is, I would say, that this will send a very strong message to all the perpetrators that there is actually no safe haven in which part of the world you are. So you were just talking about these individuals, 25 officials. And is it true that Aung San Suu Kyi is named as one of the perpetrators?
Yes, a little bit of what you said previously, going back, is absolutely, it's a landmark case. I think one of the biggest problems of the of international criminality in general is the complicity of states to hide perpetrators, right? Some perpetrators, depending on where the country they belong, they have advantages and disadvantages, right? But that is more a political side. Regarding the 25 arrest warrants, I am not aware that Aung San Suu Kyi is within 25 that have been, of which arrest warrants have been arrested. I think we have to wait for Interpol's red notice about that. Argentina should have or is in the process of sending. I'm sure. I don't. Just to clarify, I'm not in the case, although I'm quite aware of the case, and I've visited the camps, etc., the refugee camps in Bangladesh, and work on the issue. I'm not directly involved in the case, but I'm not aware that there is an arrest warrant against her. I think we just have to wait for when Interpol issues the red notices to confirm that that is the case. In any
Oh,
case, she's also a subject of other investigations anyway. So,
true. Now, hypothetically,
mhm.
that we are into a different genre now, because at one time we thought that people getting Nobel Peace Prize, they cannot be subject to this kind of investigation. But unfortunately, it is, I mean, echoing, because at the one hand, we have victims suffering for ages like Nelson Mandela, and when we talk about Nelson Mandela, we think about only thing that comes into our mind is peace. Desmond Tutu is there and others as well. However, we have also seen the politicization of this Nobel Peace Prize as well. There are certain American presidents or even British politicians who received it, which are questionable. So that is not the idea. The main question that I wanted to ask is that what what would be the consequence and effect if Argentina issues a warrant of arrest against Aung San Suu Kyi, who, when she received, I remember when I was in my university days, when she received this peace prize, I was probably one of the people who went to the streets and shouted in favor of her. So, I mean, in a way, naming her an accomplice with this crime is betraying with my youth, his frustration. A young tapash is getting
Yeah.
frustrated. So what do you think is the impact and consequence of this kind of conversation even?
Yes, even if there is not arrest warrant against her, and I agree, everybody, I too celebrated that Nobel Peace Prize. Others I didn't, because I think, as you said, it has become really political issue. But even if there is no arrest warrant against her, the fact that genocide occurred under her watch, because it did happen, that is already such a problem for this particular award and any others she had received. I think she actually received Harvard and Cambridge, maybe, and they removed them. I cannot speak for the Nobel Prize organization, but certainly it's something that they would have to take into consideration whether to remove this or not. If at least her complicity is proven in this scenario, which I think it will. She was the prime minister during that time, and for many decades. I mean, the persecution, for everybody who's listening, the persecution of Rohingyas is not from the investigation, I think, goes from 2012 to 2019, I think, in Argentina. But the persecution of Rohingyas, it's really long-standing political policy, public policy in Myanmar for decades. So that ended up in the massive persecution and final genocide of 2017. But genocide doesn't happen from one day to the other. It's a process that is being built, and in this particular case, with absolute complicity, acquiescence, or even direct involvement of the government, we know, through the military, right? So she probably was very aware of this situation. And as you know, Tapush, identity cards, discrimination in education, healthcare, etc. The Rohingya are stateless. They never had a Myanmar nationality. So all of these issues are just something that should have been considered when giving her the Nobel Peace Prize. But in any case, now should absolutely be considered. And I think it really, more than her, because her reputation is already harmed, but it does harm the reputation of the Nobel organization. Absolutely.
Yeah, so the next question is about the from the key findings of the court, what I understand that these persons are getting tried for sexual harassment on Rohingyas. So, do you have any idea like what kind of sexual harassment we are talking about and what kind of experience the victims suffered?
A little bit of, yes. What I followed up on, I believe in 2023, there were 7 witnesses that provided testimony in Argentinian courts. Of those 7 witnesses, victims, of course, 6 were women who had suffered sexual violence. The sexual violence that is investigated, I think one of the main criminal types or criminality acts was gang rape. That is considered within the context of genocide, actually. And we know that sexual violence has been long-standing recognized as a genocide conduct. So I think it's very important that Argentina
Right.
investigates this crime in particular, because it was extremely widespread within the persecution in 2017, within the persecution of Rohingyas. I myself, in my 2 visits to the camp, met a lot of survivors, and it was really a very pressing and moving situation of extreme pain. I mean, almost impossible to describe. So I think I'm glad the emphasis is being put on that. And given that 6 of the 7 witnesses were victims of sexual violence, I think both the prosecution and the court are putting high emphasis on that. Yes, on the sexual violence mainly women and girls have suffered. Mhm.
Sexual violence, from the parlance of international crimes, is the worst kind of crime because you are not only like if you kill someone, you are just probably killing a person. But when you are violating someone sexually, then actually you are not only destroying physic but also destroying the dignity. The kind of harm psychologically and physically you are inflicting is unimaginable. And when it is coming from someone in power, or when you know that these kind of persons like military persons, if they are doing it, then actually it is quite harmful for the psyche of the victims. So I think the right kind of message is getting delivered through this ruling. I hope that the Interpol will issue a warrant against them. So when we are talking about Interpol issuing red notice and things like that, what kind of challenges do you think will be there to issue red notice against them or bringing these perpetrators before the court?
Yes, Tapush. No, the issue of red notices, I think, won't be a problem. The biggest problem will certainly be to finally apprehend the perpetrators, right? There is an obligation of those countries belonging to the ICC, right? So more than, I think, 125 countries or something like that, to turn in perpetrators if they visit their countries, right? That is what is happening in the most popular cases now that we hear. We don't hear so much about the Rohingya because, unfortunately, as we always discuss, there are first, second, third class citizens in the world. But in any case, the 25 arrest warrants, the individuals, those 25 individuals, will have difficulties leaving Myanmar. They would have to at least try to stay in Myanmar, or they would only be able to travel to countries that are friendly to Myanmar and Myanmar politics. If not, they have the obligation under international criminal law to turn in the perpetrators to Argentina. That is very difficult. It's highly difficult, but I think that situation, or that difficult situation, does not need to blind us from the actual impact of this case already, of victims being able to give testimony in court, of evidence being in court and being gathered in public record for forever, for history, of a case building up for humanity, for the future of humanity, of arrest warrants being issued. So even if that is the case, that is the end of the case, which I hope it's not. And politics change all the time. Duterte was just detained and sent to the Netherlands when he was being quite comfortable in his own situation. Politics change constantly. So hopefully one day they will be able to sit in the Argentinian courts, and we will be all able to witness, at least some of them will be able to witness an oral trial against them. But in the meantime, we have to think of how important it is what is happening right now, and how important it is for the victims to know they're not forgotten. A country far away is doing its best to help them in their search for accountability. So there is a lot to be, I'm not going to say happy, because these are never happy moments, but at least to be proud of, and to be proud of the struggle of civil society to bring this case to the courts. So I think there are positive aspects, even if we have a lot of time ahead of us before someone sits in an Argentinian court. I hope I'm mistaken, and we see somebody soon. In any case.
Right. Let me ask you an academic question. For example, if the same set of perpetrators are tried by ICC on the same kind of charges, what happens?
Yes, there is the principle of ne bis in idem that applies in international criminal law as well. And Argentina is considered a subsidiary jurisdiction. So the main jurisdiction, of course, would be Myanmar. But in terms of agreeing whether ICC it's a more primary jurisdiction than Argentina, that is arguable. It hasn't been determined yet. And I think the case in the ICC, we only have an investigation. So I think so far the ICC won't probably mingle with this 25 and the same facts, right? It might investigate those individuals for other crimes, but not for the crimes that are currently in Argentina. I've mentioned several times that we need the collaboration of these tribunals. Argentina on its own cannot do it, as any other country which is opening their courts for universal jurisdiction. We don't have the capacity, and those countries either, they don't have the capacity to investigate everything. So I think it's very important that the ICC also investigates, not for the same crimes, the same people for the same crimes, but maybe the same people for other crimes, or at least they contribute communications with each other in order to send the evidence, and whatever was investigated, for example, in the ICC, if there is a new crime appearing for those, it could be sent to the court of Argentina. So I think we are learning to that, to find ways of contribution in between those two jurisdictions. I think I'm giving you more of a practical answer than an academic one. Absolutely, the principle of ne bis in idem is untouchable, so they cannot be tried twice for the same crime, even if it's different jurisdictions. But in any case, we need to think that this idea of complementarity, of subsidiarity, it has to be in order for jurisdictions to help each other. to help each enhance accountability and protect the rights of victims. And sometimes one jurisdiction, and the ICC is insufficient, right? Also, the ICC is insufficient. So one jurisdiction is never sufficient. We're talking here about 1 million people being victims of atrocity crimes. We are talking about hundreds of perpetrators, thousands of perpetrators. So it's impossible for the Argentinian courts to issue arrest warrants and investigate the crimes committed by each and single one of those perpetrators. Identify the crimes may be proven, but then linking those crimes to an individual, it's very, very hard task, especially given the fact that it's impossible to travel to Myanmar for those purposes, right? So I think the contribution of more than one jurisdiction is essential for these cases.
So, when we are talking about more than one jurisdiction trying these cases, what does it mean for Bangladesh? You know that Bangladesh is actually hosting over 1 million Rohingya refugees. And for our listeners, Bangladesh is not a part to the Refugee Convention. In spite of that, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina actually took up all these Rohingya refugees and hosted them. So, what does it mean for Bangladesh? Could this ruling support Bangladesh's efforts in seeking justice or repatriation? What do you think?
I hope so. I mean, Bangladesh has really faced one of the most serious humanitarian crises that we've had in recent years. And I mean, we're talking about 700, 800,000 people crossing the border in 3 months, literally. So it's an enormous crisis addressed by a country which is not now with the political situation, but previously, which faces a lot of issues on its own accountability trials for the crime committed in 1971, high rates of poverty and underdevelopment, etc. So a lot of issues and yet face this crisis. So I hope it helps. I think that the humanitarian aspect has to be addressed differently. I'm not sure how the impact of the case in Argentina or the ICC or even the ICJ will allow to give some relief to Bangladesh, because Myanmar is not at the moment going to receive the Rohingyas. Absolutely, I don't think so. I mean, it's a military dictatorship and it's absolutely violent towards other groups, dissidents, etc. So unfortunately, the humanitarian help should come from countries, from different countries in the world with the desire to help Bangladesh face this issue. Now, I'm not sure of the amount of refugees now, but there is probably more than 1 million at the moment. And the 2 times I visited before the pandemic, Bangladesh was pursuing its biggest efforts, right? Now, of course, there is a political crisis as well in Bangladesh that probably impacts as well the situation of Rohingyas. But this is a decision of the international community to help Bangladesh, which has been really not ignoring the issue, I would say. It has been not willing or absolutely ignoring the issue of helping to cope with such a large number of people, of influx of people coming in literally the extent of 3 months, because it was from August to November, December 2017.
Right. I mean, if you ask me that the question of repatriation seems to be a political question and which needs to be decided by superpowers like China is the key player here, because they need to push Myanmar so that they can get back to their motherland, they can get back there. But the problem is that none of the superpowers are worrying about it any longer. They are talking about, for example, the other day I was listening to a debate about that which country will be taking how many refugees within in their country, even the Rohingyas one. So nobody is talking about sending them back again. So I will just get back to the last question of our conversation. Is that, do you see that this justice process of Argentina as uh, as a hope in the fight for accountability against crimes against humanity, genocide? How do you see that?
Absolutely, Tapush. I think it's really. I mean, I don't want to say as sort of quoting the name of the not the name because I don't remember him, but I was a little bit surprised that this person in Armenia was mentioning the relevance of universal jurisdiction in general. So I think it is very hopeful that what is happening in Argentina, for me personally, of course, it's such a situation of pride to think that my courts can bring some relief to people abroad that are unable to access any other form. I think it also may put some thoughts, as I said, and some pressure on this issue, on enhancing this issue of collaboration between ICC and even ICJ, even if the nature of ICJ jurisdiction is different. But thinking of connecting the different courts and jurisdiction working in the world for issues of accountability. So I think the impact is no other than positive. My fear, as I have expressed a few times before, is that because Argentina itself suffers from economic crisis and social crisis as well, we might not have the resources. And that is why I always put this emphasis on collaborating with us. Our prosecutions, our civil society, and our courts are quite experienced in the issue of human rights. So it's something to take profit of, but it's also something to give support, right? International support in terms of collaboration. And I think more countries should get into this idea of making more flexible, and like Spain, right, making more flexible their courts via universal jurisdiction. So I only, as I said, even if we don't have in the near or mid future anybody sitting in our courts, any Burmese officials sitting in our courts for the crimes they're accused of, we still have so much, so many positive actions that have been taken that should make the international community proud of this form of accountability.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Irene. So I will wrap it up. And dear listeners, as we wrap up this episode of the SADF podcast, we are reminded that justice, though often delayed, is never out of reach when pursued with courage and conviction. Argentina's ruling on the Rohingya genocide is more than a legal milestone. It's a testament to the power of universal jurisdiction and the global responsibility to confront crimes against humanity and genocide, no matter where they occur. Our conversation with Dr. Irene Victoria Massimino has illuminated the profound legal and moral implications of this case and how it resonates far beyond the courtroom. From the survivors in refugee camps in Bangladesh to advocates and legal scholars around the world, this ruling offers a glimmer of hope and a call to action. Let this episode serve as a reminder: borders may define nations, but justice knows no boundaries. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more conversations that challenge, inform, and inspire.
Thank you.
Yes, you can start saying.
Thank you so much for having me, the push, and for addressing this relevant topic. And to all the listeners, I hope you have enjoyed the podcast and have got informed about this accountability issue. Thank you.
The pleasure was all ours, and especially mine, meeting you after such a long time. And hopefully, we will have you in the future episodes of this podcast.
Thank you. I look forward to that.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.